In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up and design a basic business card using Corel Draw. Let's get at it. Alright, today we're going to take a look at how to design a basic business card. So the first thing we want to do is launch Corel Draw, which I've already done. Second thing we need to do is create a new document. Click New here. You can also do File, New, however you like to do it. And you need to set up the basic parameters. Again, you can change these already again once you're in, but if you know what you're designing, you can set your workspace up and save time right from the start. So I'm familiar with the business cards that I designed for my printer, and business cards are 3.5 by 2 inches when they're printed. That's the final size. So in other words, they are printed and then they are cut down to 3.5 and 2. So the original design file that I send to that printer is 3.6 and 2.1, and that allows them to cut the business card down to size. The color mode for printing is CMYK. RGB would be used for screen, web related stuff. And then the resolution depends on your printer, typically 300 or 350 for smaller items. And for things like banners, pop-up banners, giant vinyl banners, those kinds of things, you might end up doing something like 150. Let's say OK to that. And so that sets up my workspace here. You can see that it's defaulted to inches here because that's what I selected from the other screen. You could change that if you wish to. I'm comfortable and familiar with using the inches when I'm doing print work such as this. Here's my size. Obviously I've got my color palette down the side here, and then any number of different dialogues you can have here. Object manager for where items are, text if you're working with the different fonts and those sorts of things. So the first thing I like to do is set up a basic overall rectangle. This covers the complete size of my design. Now when I drag that out, I don't worry exactly about the size because I'm going to change it myself. I make sure that this is unlocked so that the ratio can be changed independent of one another. And then I'm simply going to come in here, type in 3.6 and 2.1 and hit enter. And that makes this the exact size that I need it. Now I don't know if this is exactly centered or not, so I also hit the letter P on my keyboard to make sure that it's centered. I may decide to change the border to a different color. I don't like to go with no border. If you click the X here, that means it's no border. It's a right click. You can see that the border is gone. The reason why I don't is that if I'm sending a screenshot to a customer to review, it's nice for them to be able to see sort of the final size. So I typically do something like a light gray or a medium gray. I don't do colors and that sort of thing. But you can do black, but again, that can throw people off, and they think, for some reason, they think that it's being printed when it's just simply the outline of your design. All right, enough of that. All right, so the first thing I like to bring in is the logo because that is kind of a dominant design feature. So I'm going to import that, and I'm going to grab the print version. Now, if I just click and let this go, it's going to be the full size of the design file, and then I can click and drag to change the size. I can click holding the Shift key down, which will keep the item centered. You'll notice here, I'll show it again. If I do this, it drags it the direction I drag it. If you hold the Shift key down, it keeps it centered. The other is you can actually type in a size. I could say I want it to be 1 inch and hit enter, right? And again, in this case, it's messed it up because my lock ratio is unlocked. So if I lock the ratio and then type 1, it resizes appropriately. Okay, so those are all ways that you can resize things very quickly. The other way you can do it is simply upon import, you can drag it to the size you want, or approximately the size you want. And I find that to be the easiest way to deal with it. Okay, so I've just thrown that up there, and then I have the information from the customer, and again, name, title, phone number, that sort of thing. And so you can just start typing that stuff in here. And it depends on what you want to do with it design-wise. You can keep all of the fonts together and then resize them individually. Like I could do the like this, and then I say, well, I want the Joe Rocket to be bigger, but I want Bossman, the title, to be smaller. You can come up and you can actually just go ahead and change those around, right? So for example, I can make that 9 and then make this something like, I don't know, 12, and then I can align it to the right if I wish. So that's one way you could do it, and then I can obviously make something bold, right? The usual kinds of word processing type things can be done here. The other is you can actually keep everything separate, so you can just keep typing in, you know, the next font if you wish. So let's do some phone numbers. I'm going to do and like I said, right now it's just defaulting to Arial, and it defaults at 24. That's essentially the Corel Draw setup. So it's out of the box. That's kind of how it comes, and that's okay. You know, I don't mind manually changing things. You'll notice I did this. I was still in edit mode. I thought I was changing the font size, but I wasn't. Now that I've clicked out and I can select it, now if I type in the size, it'll actually change it. So here, if I go into edit mode, I can hit enter. Let's say I'll do something like that for a different phone number, and that will maintain the same size and everything because I'm in a particular piece of text and I'm simply adding to it. So that's one way you can go. Again, you can separate them if you wish. Depends on what you want to do. I like typically to keep things like all my phone numbers together, and then I'll keep things like the phone number and possibly the web address together. It depends on what you're doing exactly. Now, again, you can also decide to add in things like Office or phone or what have you. But if you have a design or a graphic you want to add to that, you can do that as well. It's not uncommon for people to want something like a P or cell number. They want it to be M for mobile, that kind of thing. Right. So these are decisions you'll have to make with your customer of specifically what they want to see, if they want to see those kinds of things, or if they want, you know, little graphics there. You know, it's not uncommon to do something like that. Now, depending on the font you're using, the spacing can be different based on character choice, and so you may want to play around with some of these alignments to get a perfect alignment between the front portion and the back portion. So you could try to do to the right, which will make sure that this is aligned, but then these might be moved out of sorts. You can also do something like force justify, which will then kind of space everything out. If none of those options work for you, then what you end up having to do is break out these into a separate piece of text. So keep that in mind. As we play with the actual fonts, once we get to that point, we'll take a look, see what we get. So I want to do an email as well and a physical address. So I just did a Control-D to copy that text because I like that size and it's fine for right now. Did Control-A to select everything. And then I'm going to put something like an address. And you'll notice the way that it's typing out, it's because I've got the force justify on that text, which I can then, of course, change back if I need it to be something different. Drag that here. And so, again, it's a little messed up. I'm going to deselect the edit mode, and then I can say, well, I like that or I don't like that. If you want to do the more traditional thing, right, you can simply do that. And maybe you need to just tweak things. And then I'm going to add the zip code. I forgot to put that in. Okay. So that's one way to handle that. And then Control-D again. And then now I can do something like Control-A. Maintaining sort of the same design thing. I can do the email. And then I can go now. A lot of my clients send me really long email addresses, which is a big pain in the rear end. but you just have to learn to deal with it. So you may have to change sizes, alter it. Now, one of the things I like to do is keep all ways to contact the person together, and all ways to contact the office together as a separate item. So what I'll sometimes want to do is have like phone numbers and emails, all together, and then I would do something like address and the web address together. But it does come down to the design and the length of things like the email address. In this case, this would look kind of ridiculous. So I might consider moving that down and keeping it separate, because I can do a couple of longer elements together, and maybe because it's separate I can get rid of that. People should know. And then I can do, see, right here is a perfect thing that CorelDraw won't fix. It's in the forums. What I did was I was in there, I hit enter, and so it said, oh, this is an email address, I'm going to create a hyperlink. Because when you print something, you need it to be a hyperlink. And that's sort of the argument within the Corel forums, which is how few people design something in Corel to be a web thing, right? Like, I guess if you're doing PDFs or something, you want to have it make linkable. So what you end up having to do is Control Z to undo, and what you're undoing is the creating of the hyperlink. So that's something to keep in mind. And then there's the web address. And again, this is a very simple card we're putting together here. And so I can kind of get those lined up, but I'm not sure if they're exactly aligned or not. One thing you can do is click in the ruler area and drag over a guideline and let go, and then try to get things lined up. That's one way to handle that, and we'll cover some of that soon. The other way is simply to highlight all of the text, and then you can use your keyboard commands to align everything right or left or what have you. So if I do L, it's trying to align everything to the left, which obviously is no good in this case. If I do R, it aligns everything to the right side. And so in this case, I know that everything on this side is perfectly aligned. So that's something to keep in mind. You can obviously do C for center as well. You follow me? All right. So here's, again, a very simple setup. I've got the background. I've got some text laid out here. And then let's not just leave it quite this simple. We'll throw in a little bit of design to it. I'm going to create another rectangle along the bottom. Like that. And then I want it to be this red. But this graphic is not a vector object, so I have no way of editing or finding out what that red is. So what I do is I select the eyedropper tool, get over my red there, and you can see that it's a CMYK color. Again, it's a print logo, so it's for a print item. Click it, and I can add it to palette if I wanted to, which would be useful if I wanted to select a few colors and have them all on my palette. But if I'm just going to use it right away, I can simply dump it right in there. And you'll notice that by default, the new object has a border on it, which is black in this case. Now I may want to keep the black border because this is potentially useful because I have black in the logo here, or I may not. If I don't want it, I just go to the X and I right-click, and then that border goes away. Maybe I want to do something a little bit different, or even a thicker one. Because the downside, if I were to put a border on this, let me do a border in black, you'll see that right now it actually goes over the edge of the design. So that would mean now I have to take this object and put it inside of this container, this object, so that the design that I submit for printing is correct size. If I leave it like this, this is going to affect the overall size of the actual print file. And again, we don't want this printed. We don't want this printed. We want only that top bar printed. So you can stretch this out and then make sure it's in the container, or you can simply do a second as a border on the top. So let's do it both options. So let's take this, we're going to do object, and we're going to power clip it into this one, like that. So now when I zoom back in, you can see that the red box with the black border has been what looks like cropped off, and it's still showing here, but this is all gone, and it's actually inside that frame. So if I right-click this container and do Edit Power Clip, now it shows me items that are inside, and so it's here as I zoom in again, and so I can move that around. None of this makes any difference at all. It's going to get cut off right here because that's the frame that I'm dealing with. Then I do Finish Editing Power Clip, and then I can do F4, which will center my entire design. And so I might, I could call that good, or I could decide, oh, I really want that border to be thicker, so I'm going to edit. I'm going to go here. Because this is a regular object, I can select here for different sizes. And let's go big with that. And I'm going to right click and do Finish Editing, and then F4 again. And so I can have something like that. Maybe I like that. You'll notice here that my design, right, is down here. So this is one of the issues of doing the whole border on an object, kind of a thing. So I'm going to edit the power clip, right click this, and I'm going to get rid of my black border, and then I'm going to say, just sort of line this up down here, right click, finish, and now I want to add F4, then I'm going to simply add a second bar on top, right, which you can do fairly easily. And so you could just make that black, get rid of the border, right? So those are the couple of ways you can handle it. The obvious, you just figure out what works best for you in terms of the project you're working on. Same issue applies. Is that is this going to be too big? Is it going to bleed over off the edge of the design? And do I need to power clip it back in? So those are things you have to think about because sometimes you'll have something that you think looks correct, but when you actually generate the print file, it ends up being a bigger size and you're not sure why. And a lot of times it's little things like that. They overhang slightly, you don't see it, and now it messes up your design. So this is, again, a very simple business card. This is the front of it. So what we're going to do, let me kind of play with alignments there. And I could say, you know what, that looks fine. I'm happy with that. And there is a very simple business card. Thanks for watching. More videos are on the way. And if there's something specific you want to learn, let me know in the comments below.